Hello. In this video, we're going to talk about Penny Marshall's film Renaissance Man, which most people will probably know as Danny DeVito's film Renaissance Man, because Danny DeVito's name is the only one who makes the cover of this DVD. But it is directed by Penny Marshall, if you care about who directed the film. So, Renaissance Man is a really interesting movie about a guy named William Rago, Bill Rago, played by Danny DeVito. He loses his job as a big name advertising guy because basically he's having these sort of personal issues, going through a divorce. His daughter hates him, etc., etc. So he loses his job. He goes to the unemployment office, and then eventually they find him a job, which he's technically qualified to do, I guess, in 1994. He's technically qualified to do it because he has a master's degree. The job is teaching. As a teacher, I can tell you, just having a master's degree of some kind does not actually really qualify you to teach, particularly not to teach well. But the teaching job, is for the Army. Basically, they have a group of recruits who are not the brightest of soldiers. We'll put it that way. Basically, they are all on the verge of getting thrown out of the Army because their instructors keep having to tell them stuff, explain stuff over and over and over again, and they can't seem to retain that information. So, Bill Rago is brought in. His task is basically to teach these soldiers to think critically, to think, to be able to comprehend the information that they're being given. He doesn't really have a particularly good sense of how to go about this, but eventually, while doing an exercise where they are reading something and then are going to sort of give brief presentations about what they've read, Bill tells them about the section of Hamlet that he's reading. And this seems to really spark their interest. They become fascinated by Hamlet. And so the movie largely revolves around Bill teaching these students to read and interpret Hamlet in a critical way, and this sort of strengthens their cognitive capacities. Along the way, there's any number of challenges. The students have interpersonal issues. They have sort of coming-of-age type challenges. One student in this group who's actually much smarter than the Army believes him to be, Bill goes to the Army and says, can you sort of look into this guy's records and see if he can maybe actually get a promotion or something? And it turns out that he had been a crack dealer, coke dealer, something like that. And so he ends up getting arrested. I don't know. There's all these various elements to it. A lot of coming of age type stuff, both for the students in the class who sort of flourish as thinkers and human beings and become more confident, more capable, etc., but also for Bill, who realizes he doesn't have to be a dick, and sort of realizes that maybe actually advertising is no longer his calling, that teaching people and the sort of joy of sharing Shakespeare with Army people is really what he's meant to do. So we've got these coming-of-age elements, and then, of course, everything sort of winds up happily at the end, along a number of different axes. So that's all great stuff. We get some good physical comedy. Danny DeVito does some weird dances in a couple of places. He climbs the Victory Tower, which is basically a giant obstacle course and he has to rappel down a wall at the end, etc., etc. So we get that element of like physical comedy, but it's not over the top, and it certainly doesn't drive the plot of the movie. I like the idea. I like the idea of Shakespeare and interpretation of Shakespeare plays as a way of teaching people the fundamentals of critical thought. Uh, I am a literature guy. I, even though I'm largely at the moment teaching composition courses, writing courses, rhetoric courses, I am basically a literature guy. I love that idea. And I like these sort of campus movies, teaching movies, things like this. That being said, there are some logistical problems with this film and the way that it's approached. The premise is Bill Rago, advertising executive, now unemployed, goes to the unemployment office. And for some reason, the military, who has access to personnel, who has access to very, very, very smart personnel, the military goes to the Michigan State Unemployment Services and says, hey, we need someone to teach these soldiers. Send us anybody with a master's. We literally don't give a fuck. Rago has no teaching experience. He is not in the military. He's never been in the military. Other than having a master's, he has no qualifications to do this. The military, I don't know, maybe I'm giving the military more credit than they deserve here, but it seems to me like there is no possible way that the military is going to be like, yeah, we're going to recruit a teacher through the unemployment office, and if the person we get isn't a teacher, doesn't really matter. Like, that's just not how things are done. So that whole premise is fundamentally problematic to me. And I get that, like, I'm not missing it here. I get that that is literally the setup for the entire movie, and the whole plot doesn't function without that. But it is still kind of this weird contrivance. And then once Rago gets into the classroom, the military is basically just like, teach them to think. And that's literally all the instructions that he's given. He's not given any sort of resources that we can tell, apart from he can use the chalkboard in the room. He's not given a particular objective. He's not given particular, like, standards that they need to meet. He's not given any suggestions about how to go about accomplishing this task. And again, he's not a trained teacher. He does not have pedagogical training that would help him naturally figure out, okay, if I want to achieve this objective with students, here are the strategies I might try. The military literally has said, here is your goal. And I think that is not at all how the military works. I've never been in the military either. I don't know this for sure. But it seems to me like if the military wants to achieve something in a training program, and this is a training program, that they are going to establish, all right, here's what needs to happen. Here are the best practices for achieving that. Here's what we want done, and we have qualified people to do so. I mean, the literal just laissez-faire approach that they take is, so, like, there's one point where Rago he goes to a Kinko's or something. Like, he goes and he personally pays to have copies of Hamlet printed out for these students. Why is the military not paying for that? This is a military corps. Like, this is part of their training. This is a pilot program that the colonel of this base has set up because he wants these soldiers to succeed. Why is the military not fighting Rhaego Xeroxing options if he wants to Xerox stuff? Or you could just buy, the military could just buy half a dozen cheap copies of Hamlet. I mean, this is 1994. You can probably find half a dozen copies for like $1 each. The military could spend $6 on this program. So, I don't, like, again, this is just this weird thing where it's like, it seems to me that it is totally disconnected from how things in the military actually function. The regimentation, the order with which things function, the idea of establishing objectives and meeting those objectives, setting standards, things like this, all of this is like completely absent from the movie. And again, I get that that is what drives the comedy, that's what makes the plot function, etc., etc., but if we really think about this film in terms of like, what is this movie doing, and does it make any sense? As much as I love the movie, the answer, unfortunately, is no, it doesn't make that much sense.